So yeah, welcome everybody this afternoon to, I think it's our 14th seminar in the series, What Were We Thinking? And today I would very much like to welcome Glenn Holtzman. He is a senior lecturer in the School of Visual and Performing Arts at Nelson Mandela University. He holds a PhD in the anthropology of music from University of Pennsylvania, US. And he's published a lot on decoloniality, performativity, and colored identities, and is also very active. I always think in people's I don't want bios that it's like, I'm also active, but he is indeed active, and not only also as a creative artist and a musical director. And today he's going to talk to us, or he's going to bring all of this diversity of his experience to us, to give a very diverse, hopefully quite dissonant talk about thinking insofar as it kind of relates to collective consciousness. And he's going to associate collective consciousness to alternative parallel realities in the metaverse. And this is a very, as he says, consonant and dissonant space. And I'm very interested to hear what Glenn is going to offer. It's always exciting and interesting to listen to Glenn. So without any further introduction, Glenn, over to you, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It's always a pleasure to be part of the seminar series, and always a privilege to be part of such an experimental space also. So thank you, colleagues, for engaging with me this afternoon and for allowing me to experiment and share some thoughts and ideas which I've been having. I've said to Andrea they're disjointed and fragmented, but hopefully there'll be some coherence and consonance in addition to some dissonance also. So the first part of this talk, I'd like to focus on this concept of what I'm phrasing as poetically lost or found, or possibly even dead or alive. So humanity is currently undergoing a transition whereby the consciousness of the human is now aware that the planet is undergoing changes, and humanity and how it is practiced is undergoing changes. For some, this temporal era is a moment of great joy and the expectation for the arrival of new, peaceful and joyous ways after the turmoil. And for others, it's a time of fear, while the natural and social world, and particularly natural disaster, is at its peak. Climate change, like a ghost in our awareness, and poverty the world over, reminds us daily that we are destroying our planet and not caring enough for our people. And the planet is mirroring this, evolving as it has done for millions of years, and humans evolving too, for good or for bad. We are also living in a digital world where we can easily access anything that stimulates our consciousness, and we look forward to finding new things daily that give us a feel for life, and that reminds us we are not alone in our interesting fascinations, whether it would be a hunger for information and content, or whether it would be communities or groups that share similar interests or hobbies, or sometimes it's just a matter of keeping up with those we know and love, glimpsing into their lives through the photographs and remarks that they make on their relevant social media pages. The feeling of a sense of belonging is something that all of us hold dear, and perhaps some of us long for a belonging more than others. Whatever the psychological or social reasons for our sense of belonging being perhaps needy or satisfactory, we find comfort in knowing that we share ideas with others, that they get us, that they understand us, that they accept us, and that they are interested in us. But what does it mean to feel connected and to feel life? I'm talking about contemporary life here, as well as digital life. We are all connected on a daily basis to others through invisible webs, networks of telecommunication. And so all of humanity is connected to one another through an instant ping, that delivery of a message that our ancestors, a mechanism that our ancestors developed over great many struggles and experiments. At first, perhaps with drumming conversations, one village to another, and ultimately Morse code and mail, and then mobile phones. Communication is part of life. It brings with it an affect, well received or ill received. And the joy of feeling alive and connected to one another or a higher power is something that each one of us has encountered at some point in our lives, at the very least. For many, it is a joy that is fleeting, that is addictive, that needs to be returned to again and again. And perhaps shifting away from that very quickly, one can think of an athlete who trains for hundreds of hours or days to strengthen their bodies and their minds in order to participate in the competition and win it. When they emerge victorious in the event, they experience an overwhelming joy in the moment and for a while thereafter, but the joyous feeling doesn't last forever. So too the high of feeling alive will soon dissipate into the routine of normal everyday life once more, the athlete satisfied but once again needing another win. Similarly, a gambler who wins a jackpot experiences an overwhelming joy, a reason to have been alive, to have played the game again and again, and not in vain. The gambler will very likely return to playing another game, the joyous moment needing to be rekindled, the lucky streak continued. And I would argue that we return again and again to communication, to connection, and to feelings of belonging. They give us a sense of joy. But we also are very familiar with losing in life, with profound sorrow, with grief, and with disappointment. Not everyone can experience winning all the time. Not everyone will succeed at what they're busy with. And everyone anticipates that their own loss of life, ultimately, in addition to having to live on without those that they have lost, affects us. What have we won and what have we gained as humans and as a human species, and what are we losing and what are we discarding? So think now then with me why some people would become consumed with living in a metaverse at this time in the development of humanity. The simple answer is that we are searching for ourselves online. We are searching for like-minded people who value us, because we have become devalued in the natural order of things on this planet, I would argue, and so would many others. Our machines have eclipsed us in terms of being powerful things on this planet. Some would argue even more powerful than us humans. And so a big concept which I'm going to be focusing on in this talk is the feeling of being plugged in to something, and that it is a product of the collective consciousness of humanity that has evolved over thousands of years. In other words, I argue this is the product of the spiritual component of the human, and why religions across the world have built temples to gods to feel plugged in to something outside of themselves. Many humans are still plugged into the natural world, but many humans are also unplugged from the natural world. Many humans are plugged into the virtual world, and few remain unplugged from it in the current world. The virtual world has become fused with the natural world in our time we are living in, by allowing humans to feel more natural, but in the context of evolving natures. We all have evolving natures, a nature that is innately unique to each of us, our soup of the attributes of our souls, and our conscious, subconscious, and unconscious egos, or what some philosophers refer to as our satiety or quiddity, our essence or fullness of our beings. We are all on this planet to learn various things, to have subjective experiences that push us even further into the unknown or new, or perhaps more of the same we have all become accustomed to in our brief sojourns and evolutions. We all recognize what constitutes for us a cognitive dissonance or a cognitive consonance, or perhaps even a cognitive turbulence, even though we may not necessarily use those terms to describe them when we are experiencing them or thinking about them. But we all know what we like and what we don't, what makes us feel at ease and what makes us feel uncomfortable. We know what ideologies or belief systems we subscribe to and what we reject. We know when we are shifting our perspective on a belief or moral we once held dear in our consciousness and expression of our lives, and we are all aware when we become changed persons. And sometimes those outside of us can also recognize the development, sometimes uttering to us, "You've changed." And depending on how those words are charged, they are either soothing and affirming or judging and reprimanding. My interest in today's talk is to very briefly draw attention to the changing nature of humans and their love-hate relationships they have with their virtual devices and their virtual selves that have become portals to the metaverse. The planet is currently flooded at this very moment with billions of people staring at a screen with an internet connection. In fact, you are doing it right now with me. Our daily lives and our daily bread have become so dependent on being connected to the metaverse. Some are consumed with joy looking at their device, while others are disturbed and startled. Looking for a job? You can't find one without having to go online. Don't have a job? Kill time by watching things online. Have a job? Spend most of your day doing tasks online, sometimes going online, avoiding your job. Go home and then do the same. Got to go online again before bed. Want to avoid small talk with friends or family at a dinner table or party? Go online and give attention to the metaverse and ignore the folks around you. Want to find out what to cook with the leftover groceries in your pantry? Go online. You'll find a recipe. Need the weather for the day? Go online and check the hourly and extended forecast. Need news? Go online. Need a break? Check out reels and comments online. Sitting on the toilet, scroll, scroll, scroll. No end online. Need music? Stream online. Need TV and film? Stream online. Need knowledge or entertainment? Stream. Stream more. Algorithm feeding you more and more. More of what you want and more of what you like. Need to diagnose yourself? Go online. Need to get healthier or more beautiful? Look online. Don't want to gym with others? Gym online and in your home. Need a cab or a ride? Find one online. Don't bother standing on the street. Tickets for a concert? Buy them online, not at the door anymore. Feeling lonely? Find a date or hook up online. Ping, ping, ping. Every hour. Instant message, email and push notifications. Eskom, your massive push. Day ruined. Go online and in your home. Go online, UPS battery for the Wi-Fi. Data for when I'm on the road. Must stay online. Must be connected. Must stay plugged in. Need help figuring out something or completing an assignment or doing research? Must search online. AI bot to the rescue. AI bot loved. AI bot hated. AI bot taking over online. Knowledge economy scared. Knowledge economy fragile. Young people fascinated with AI bot. AI bot can be a virtual mental therapist. AI listens. AI speaks back. AI helps. AI disappoints. AI like human. AI taking over human. Need God? Stream church or mosque or synagogue online. Need conspiracy theory? Find other astute folk online. Silly mainstream masses brainwashed online. Critical thinkers sharing ideas online. Virtual nanny needed? Hypnotize children online so that mommy and daddy can also go online. Anti-anything? Find the message boards online. Pro-anything? Spread the message more online. Need attention? Give attention. Are you plugged in or out of the metaverse? Plug in, plug out. Log in, log out. Ping, ping, ping. The metaverse is calling you. Do you answer or decline? This poetic rant I've just uttered serves to remind us that we, as a species of humans and companion machines or devices, have evolved so much from the origins of our species as simple hunter-gathering societies in the natural world, that we are now merely a hunter-gatherer people in the meta world or metaverse. The underworlds and overworlds of our individual selves, in combination with that of other humans, leave us almost completely dependent on our virtual selves, a true self that is holographically or digitally plugged in to infinite possible things we do to sustain our lives and feelings of connection to others. So now in the second part of the talk, I'm going to shift to the idea of parallel realities. One of the most influential and profound things to have happened to me in my life is the awareness or knowledge gained that multiple realities exist simultaneously, that we all have parallel lives, and that our consciousness is able to move from one reality to another for various reasons, sometimes known, sometimes unknown. In fact, when the Zoom call ends, you will go back to a different reality. You've just suspended your consciousness here with me for this moment. Each time you move between worlds without even realizing it. In the underworld of the knowledge economy that is not part of mainstream thought or not widely accepted ideas, the phenomenon of the Mandela effect is something that haunts and occupies a core part of my consciousness. I'm an experiencer of the phenomenon. And already by writing these words or uttering them out loud, I'm made to feel like a weirdo, like a lunatic, like someone who says they've been abducted by extraterrestrial craft or beings. Some will laugh off or dismiss the gravitas of the phenomenon because they will have cognitive dissonance with what I'm about to unpack briefly, while others will be cognitively neutral, open to learning about the phenomenon and the possibility that it might be real for some, but not for all, and others who might be experiencers themselves like me will encounter a resonance and affirmation that there are others just like me. Without going into the phenomenon of the Mandela effect too deeply, it's worthwhile to mention that the phenomenon is a subjective one, not a universal, scientifically provable one, although oral history suggests that there is a connection between our consciousness, memory, and awareness that makes living as a human even more complex than we can ever fully comprehend. And the fact that the evidence for advocating for or refuting the phenomenon remains largely in or out of the metaverse adds even more layers of profundity to the phenomenon. Could we have a consciousness that splits or merges with other parallel realities? Are we able to tap into multiple parallel realities through our devices? Theories of quantum physics suggest that there may be infinite parallel Earths and realities, and that each time our consciousness makes a decision, it splits, an aspect of the self or soul splitting off to experience the consequence of each choice taken, our own awareness merely on the present consciousness, although an oversoul might be banking all of these experiences of the parallel selves that split off into infinite possible realities. In other words, you may be dead in one reality already, but alive in this one. Or you may be experiencing a reality so close to another one that while there is an extreme difference between the parallel lives of A and Z, M and N might be nearer to one another and easily to be able to shift from one to the other. So that's just an example drawing on the A to Z spectrum of finite possibilities merely as a metaphor for unpacking this conundrum or thought experiment. Nevertheless, what's clear to me and to a great many humans on this planet is that something on the planet is changing or has changed. Something in the metaverse has changed or is changing, and that humans and their relationship with themselves and with one another is changing. Consider the Mandela effect now as an example of finding oneself plugged into a reality where things are not the same as they once were. These are usually regarded as residual phenomena, leftover evidence, where cognitive dissonance with actual reality in the current reality preserved in the metaverse is in disharmony for some, but cognitively consonant and harmonious for others. So let's very briefly watch a video about the Mandela effect to explain and provide examples of the phenomena.
Man, I sure do get a lot of mail from physics fans. Let's see what today's haul is, shall we, Albert? We got another one about the Mandela effect. This is just getting out of hand. What? You don't remember the Mandela effect? The Nelson Mandela one? You don't, huh? Okay, well, the Mandela effect is this pretty crazy idea that pops up from time to time. The name comes from Nelson Mandela, who was a political activist in Africa. He fought against the horrible apartheid system in South Africa and was incarcerated from the 60s to 1990. Some people claim to remember him dying in prison in the 1980s, when in reality, he was released from prison, helped overturn apartheid, and went on to be the president of South Africa for 5 years. He eventually died in 2013. It seems that some people combine their fuzzy and obviously unreliable memories of Mandela's death in the 1980s with his subsequent release and presidency and somehow conclude that we're somehow sliding between parallel universes. Can you believe that, Albert? These people have a variety of ideas about how the transfer between parallel universes occurs, from some sort of natural phenomena to it being caused by the Large Hadron Collider in Europe. Crazy, huh? And that's not the only example people cite. People remember the name of the Berenstain Bear books, that's with an AIN, as once being Berenstain Bears, that's with an EIN. Or a lot of people will swear that in the original version of the Star Wars movie, The Empire Strikes Back, that Darth Vader said, "Luke, I am your father," when what he really said was, "No, I am your father." There are tons and tons of claims like those that you can find on the internet if you want. It's really quite depressing. And Albert, this is just obviously silly. I mean, even if we were actually sliding between parallel universes, and of course we're not, how is it that our memories could survive the change? I mean, memories are preserved in the brain, and those memories would change as we shifted from one universe to the other.
And then there are a few people who claim that our bodies are getting transported to other universes where things were always different. But thinking that that could happen without anyone noticing is really approaching tinfoil territory.
The best proof of this is the Berenstain Bear example. You could go to every library on the planet and ask people to dig out their books, and every one of them would be of the AIN version. People who believe in the Mandela effect would say that this makes sense because either we moved into a world in which the spelling was always right, or because the change occurred everywhere in our universe. But if we move to another universe, we'd also move into one in which our brains always lived, in the AIN universe. And if the change occurred in our universe, you have to remember that books are made of molecules just like our brains. Unless the change was somehow confined to those just particular books, the changes to the brain atoms and the book atoms would have to be the same. We certainly would remember this differently. So this Mandela effect thing is simply silly and just isn't true. I'm telling you, Albert, I wish people would just get over it and stop sending me email about it.
And that wonderful video was accompanied by Mozart's Laudate Dominum, in case any of you were interested in what the name of that classical work is. But I disagree with everything that that man has said in that video, because he makes the claim that people who are experiencers of the Mandela effect, they are silly, that they are misremembering. And for those of us who know that we are not misremembering, we find that the metaverse is not in coherence, not in sync with the residual memory that we carry from an alternate parallel reality. So I personally would subscribe to the notion that says, even though I've been born into the reality that says Nelson Mandela did not die in the 1980s in a prison, but came to be the president of South Africa in 1994, that's part of the reality which I find myself in. I believe there are people who existed in the parallel reality which merged with this one where he did die. The reason I would say that is because I've got memories of another reality where which other people would agree with me. They also recall these memories. It's not in alignment with this universe or this metaverse or this reality I find myself in, and they vary from examples of what some people would say I'm misremembering, the JFK assassination. I know that I am not. Looking at logos of certain cars, vehicles, of products, chocolate bars, candies, cereals, I know that I am not misremembering, and there are thousands of other people on this planet with me who know we are not misremembering. So in quantum physics, everything is a probability field, and we get particular observations with the experiments we undertake. Could the same thing be happening with collective and individual consciousness? Some theorists and spiritual practitioners and progressive thinkers seem to think so. Some thinkers and physicists even believe that it is the observer in the observation process that catalyzes the experiment to ultimately yield a manifestation of a phenomena that is ultimately measurable, and that without an observer, the probability for manifestation is problematic. Cynthia Sue Larson, the author of books such as Reality Shifts, When Consciousness Changes the Physical World, also Quantum Jumps and the Aura Advantage, and her newest book, The Mandela Effect and Its Society. This author, Cynthia Sue Larson, spoke to psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove in an interview where she draws attention to the phenomenon of Schrodinger's cat to explain what some of us might be encountering in our observation that we are shifting between parallel realities, simulated realities, multiple identities, and multiple world realities. So in closing, let's take a look at the phenomenon of Schrodinger's cat very briefly to try to understand if we as humans are living in both the natural and virtual worlds, in the multiverse and the metaverse.
This wouldn't be a YouTube channel without a cat video, so without further ado, we present Schrodinger's cat. I'm sure you've heard some version of this famous thought experiment. You put a cat in a bunker with some unstable gunpowder that has a 50% chance of blowing up in the next minute, and a 50% chance of doing nothing. The gunpowder is Einstein's version. Schrödinger preferred poisonous gas. But whatever. So until we look in the bunker, we don't know whether the cat is dead or alive. And when we do look, it is either dead or alive. So if we repeat the experiment enough times with enough cats and bunkers and gunpowder, we'll see that half the time, Kitty survives, and half the time, Kitty goes bye-bye. The quantum mechanical interpretation is that before we look, the cat is in a superposition. It's both dead and alive. And our act of looking forces nature's decision. So our curiosity kills the cat. But what about the cat's perspective? Well, the cat either sees the gunpowder explode or not. So inside the bunker, we actually have these two possibilities. The powder explodes and the cat sees it explode, or the powder doesn't explode and the cat doesn't see it explode. There's no option, the powder explodes and the cat doesn't see it explode. So the cat's reality becomes entangled with the outcome of the experiment. And it's our observation of the experiment that forces nature to collapse to one option or the other. But we're like the cat too. Either the cat dies and we see it dead, or the cat lives and we see it alive. So who's observing us to force nature to collapse to one reality? Or do both possibilities happen in parallel within a larger multiverse? This collapsing to one reality problem is one of the biggest unanswered questions in quantum physics. So for Kitty's sake, can I has answer please?
Are we players of avatars in simulations, online and offline? Is the complexity of making sense out of who we are as humans and new humans entangled in duality or plurality of possible and real lives? We don't yet have the words to speak fully about the mysteries of life I'm shedding light on, and we probably never will fully understand them. But there is enough evidence to suggest that many people feeling lost in one world seem to be found in another, whatever that might be. So what does this mean for our living? What does it mean to live fully and authentically when our lives melt from one day to another, being plugged in or plugged out of our different selves or realities? Why do we prefer and rely on the virtual reality to inform our conscious reality? How do we practice cognitive consonance, dissonance, or neutrality? And what types of worlds and selves are we creating and why? I think about these things, and I wish to invite you now to also think through some of these strange things and ideas with me. And I thank you for listening, and I hope you will be willing to share your relation to the Mandela effect and your thoughts about the metaverse and its function in your own life with me. So on that note, Andrea, let's have some questions and comments. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, lots of highly interesting things to start chatting about. I'm just going to make you all a little bigger. So if anybody wants to pick us off, then just raise your hand. I think I'll be able to see it. If you find that I'm ignoring you, then just turn your video on or something, or turn your sound off and make a noise and grab my attention that way. Okay, so while you're gathering your thoughts together, let me just kick off. And I'm going now, before you went to the Mandela effect and all of that, because something that struck me that was really interesting about the beginning of your talk, this is about that idea that we are in a situation of consciousness of change. In a way, I would call it crisis. I think crisis is a good word for it. And what I very much liked about the way that you articulated it is that we have a double expectation, potentially, one of joy and peace and one of natural disaster or fear. And those two things seem to be running up against one another. And I'd just to begin with, I'd very much like you to maybe comment a little bit more on that, because what I've been hearing mostly is the expectation of natural disaster and fear. Whenever you hear crisis, you hear natural disaster and fear, and not the other side. So what is it for you that enables you to see the expectation of joy and peace alongside that of disaster and fear. I mean, but how do you manage that?
Thanks, Andrea. We are going through crisis. I would definitely agree with you that this planet and its people is going through a crisis on so many fronts. And that's why I have found, working with you over the past couple of years, to look to and turn towards this idea of complexity theory, because it's helped me at least use a little bit of a sense-making vehicle to focus on the various components of what's contributing to this, but also to make sense out of how, on an individual level, I'm experiencing it and making sense out of it, and also aware that other people are making sense out of it in different ways, some similar ways also. And so that means that there's no single monolithic view of what's happening in the world. In other words, this reminds me and comes back to the idea which kind of stimulated this presentation, Anton's presentation earlier on in the seminar series, where he spoke about a good friend of his who was highly intelligent, but would have a cognitive dissonance with him about the power of vaccines, for example, in the world. And I posited the idea, put it forward to him to say, could it not be that both of you are approaching this convergence in the present reality coming from different realities, where in a reality that this person is existing from, vaccines have been used for detrimental means or for nefarious purposes, or the knowledge, the residual knowledge of it exists in the collective consciousness of a people, which is why, try as you might with the most valid scientific data, you won't be able to convince him. I've encountered that in my own life also with my fascination with the supernatural world, extraterrestrial entities, off-planetary life, ghosts, poltergeists, other phenomenon of voice audio which can be recorded on digital devices from the so-called ghostly or supernatural realm or the afterlife realm. And they are very, very significant scientists who have dabbled in these ideas, but they've never really taken hold in a mainstream thinking. So I would say to you that as long as you have an awareness that your view is yours, it mirrors some of others' views on the planet, but if you can also accept without judgment that other people are experiencing a different reality, this allows me then to tap into this idea of, after crisis, there must be some resolution. You see, tension gives birth to a resolution. Otherwise, we won't be able to recognize it as tension, because tension comes out of a previous era where there wasn't, sorry, where there was resolution. That's how we are able to recognize this moment of crises, of tension. So from that perspective, I see things on the planet moving in cycles. And this is the same argument used by people to argue against man-made induced climate change, to say it's just a natural cycle. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm advocating for the idea that different people hold different beliefs because they find themselves entangled in different realities. And if you look at the sequential or progressive order of the natural world and natural beings from life to death, I anticipate that after whatever death is being imposed upon us as humans and on this planet, that there will be some sort of new life. So it's rooted also in, of course, a component of wanting to at least regard oneself as being spiritually enlightened. But the opposite could also be argued, where people who are spiritually enlightened will say, this is the apocalypse, this is the end of the world. So I won't subscribe to that idea or ideology at all, because I don't believe it's the apocalypse, which is why I can also understand other people will say to me, there's no such thing as parallel realities, this is it. So that's not an easy answer or a simple answer to the question that you posed, but I think it's advocating for the idea of complexity and plurality in terms of how we view ourselves and the world.
Okay, great.
I saw that Lungelo had his camera up, and then there are 3 hands. This is fantastic.
Yes. Okay, so let's order-wise, I must admit I didn't see. Let's let Lungelo go first, and then I saw Mark, and then Gary, and then Alex. Can we do it in that order? Okay, try to be brief because we'd like to get you all to have a voice.
I'm going to be super brief. I just wanted to say, Glenn, that was amazing, especially the poetic nature of it, right? I found myself just drifting away listening to your words. And strangely enough, when you referred to the Mandela effect, that just said to me that we are so connected, because I was looking at a video on the Mandela effect just yesterday. And when that came up, I was like, what? So the parallel universe for me sort of suggests that we are, or we might be going into a new sort of evolution as a human species that can meld into the metaverse. While whether we are in reality attuned to that or not, but we seem to be connected to each other more and more. I don't know whether it has anything to do with the amount of screen time and the amount of things that we are looking at, that seems to push us to a connectedness. But at the same time, that connectedness pushes us to a sense of fear and a sense of loneliness and a sense of hunger for connectedness, which is a very strange, murky place to be. So it also then, for me, reminds me of the concept of deja vu, where you would just have this strong feeling that you've seen this, you've experienced this, but you could just can't prove it, right? So I absolutely believe that there's more out there than what we see with the naked eye and what we can prove. I mean, we are here, but are we really? We could be part of some weird matrix or some person's weird imagination, but how do we actually prove that? So that's my brief 5 cents. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you, Lung. Thanks so much, Lungelo. I do think it's not by coincidence that you just watched the Mandela effect yesterday, and I'm speaking about it today. Those are the sorts of things that I'm hinting at that we can't always put into words. And the fact that we have this shared reality that we found ourselves immersed in right now, but also open to the possibility of the fact that things could be merging and separating in terms of where our consciousness is at. And it is a scary thing. I'm not doing anything new. There are many other theorists and scholars and crazy people out there on the internet who are speaking about these things, but it's not part of academic mainstream thinking. And there might be something to it. And the more we speak about it, this idea that we are connected in more ways than just a physical, and what is the power of the metaphysical connection? If the fact that we both have shared memories of something that we've never spoken about, that also hints at the fact that we've got a greater connection that we can fully comprehend. So thank you for engaging with me and finding it stimulating, and I appreciate your powerful words about my own poetic words. Thank you, my dear brother.
Thanks, Glenn. Mark.
Hi, Glenn. All the way from Bloemfontein. Hello. Always so nice to
Thanks,
hear
Mark.
your papers. And I swear the day that you do a mainstream regular papers then it will snow. And I love the fact that every time you give a paper, I'm surprised and have multiple things to take away from. I wanted to ask you 2 questions, and I'm going to try to make them very brief because I'm aware of time. The first is that as you move into an area of transdisciplinary or post-disciplinary scholarship, where you're engaging more with quantum physics and notions of alternative realities, how do you as a scholar and as a scholar who I'm familiar with, who so values the individual and the subjective, how do you, and the idea of a pluriversality, how do you square that with the science's obsession with the universal, with the objective, with the thing that applies to everyone, and they kind of a rejection of the individual? So that's my first question. And my second question is, to what extent do you think that this sort of approach to thinking through reality has a decolonial question? Or maybe a better way of saying it is the obsession with the objectively, scientifically provable idea, is that a colonial construct that decoloniality allows us to distort and diffuse a bit?
Thank you so much, Mark. It's lovely to engage with you as always, and thanks for always being supportive of my presentations at conferences and seminars. I think really you've answered your own question also by asking it a little bit, and the two are linked. The one is actually the answer to the other. So my position that I would take is to say that the more and more I dabble and tap into a mode of thinking which is not part of what has been cultivated within me as a member of the academy, and bringing into my awareness the fact that what could be regarded as lunacy, as unfathomable, as incoherent, as unprovable, as flawed, is totally fine with me. I'm an individual, and I think many people know that, which is why I'm advocating for a more of the subjective and individualistic view of a life and of phenomena. But I would say that the way that we I wouldn't say discard, but perhaps devalue what is happening in the Western scientific domain, which wants to have universal laws and prizes the objective way of viewing things and wants to discard the significance of the subjective interpretation, is that one has to allow yourself to be decolonized. And I think that because I have experienced that in my own life, in my own consciousness, to say I've been conditioned to think in a particular way in a life, I am open to new thinking. And there's a wonderful channel on YouTube which I follow, which has influenced me immensely, and it's called New Thinking Aloud. It's hosted by the psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove that I referenced in my talk. By exposing ourselves to things which we can't explain, but hearing or viewing people attempting to articulate these phenomena into words, I believe that these folks are doing a type of decoloniality with the consciousness of humans. So we are shifting away from subscribing to notions that we've inherited, but we're also trying to experiment with new ways of thinking. And so experimentation doesn't mean that it's definitive, that it has to be this way. It's a thing which is in flux, which gives us results that we may not anticipate. Decoloniality is something I'm very passionate about in trying to advance academia. But I often tell my students also, one can't do decolonization if you haven't decolonized yourself. So I would like to see us doing that more and more with our own ways of life, with our own ways of thinking, and that by dabbling in transdisciplinarity and alternative modes of thinking, we do activate what you're speaking about, which is the pluriversality of ways of being in the world and ways of making sense out of phenomena. So it's not a necessarily coherent answer to your question, but I get what you're trying to say, and I do it because it is different, because I don't want to just keep thinking along the same lines as others do. And I think at the crux of it is always to better understand myself. I've always said to folks and to my students also, the thing I know the most about in the world is myself. Therefore, somebody else cannot come and tell me I don't know more about me than they do. So if I know something to be true for me and I believe it, I have to accept it's mine. In the same way, I won't argue with somebody who says they believe differently. For me, that's fine, that's theirs. So let's have multiple ways of viewing the world and life, and perhaps fragmenting deliberately what is mainstream thinking. And certainly the presentation I've done today is trying to advocate for that, to say, what if? And I think that academia has been too afraid to do more of that. Thanks, Mark.
Great, thanks, Glenn. I think Gary was next.
Glenn, awesome. Thank you very much. Aware of time, so I'm going to be brief. Just that poetic component of your thing, it'd be lovely to see it in writing. I don't know if it's your entire thing, but that would be really great. I wanted to just three sort of brief points. And maybe the question to you is that we are starting to understand the world as a complex thing, and I use thing deliberately. And maybe it's not necessarily that we have different realities, but different angles on a common reality. And for that reason, so if we all stood around a statue in a circle, we would each have a different view of that statue, but it would still be the same statue. But we would argue with each other that our view is the right view, and we would be right in that sense, but we wouldn't be wrong either, so that was the one point. The other one is that we obviously are connected on a level beyond the immediate communication level, and I think we're starting to understand just a little bit better how that is. But we cast aspersions on it. It's a metaphor. It's the supernatural or something else or something like that. And maybe it's just our connection to the bigger system that we are part of that we don't have words for yet, or things. And then what especially struck me from your thing is this idea of this dual reality, but we're actually developing a dual reality on social media in the sense that we are creating images of ourselves in our own liking. Because we have less boundaries there than we have in real life, and I'm aware of my own language when I say that. But we almost are splitting ourselves into this other reality that we can, and we're starting to learn how to do that. So fascinating stuff. Thanks very much. That's my input.
Thank you so much, Gary. In listening to your comments and observations, all I can really say is my way of making sense out of what you said is that I think we are all curating our own realities, and having to also accept the fact that even if I use your analogy of a statue and extend it a little bit further, I would say that sometimes we are seeing things that others are not. So let's say, for example, we all are looking at the same building. We can't see the building in its fullness from all angles either, but something could be happening on one corner of the building which you may not see from your angle, but others who have that vantage are able to see. So the more I say, I've just seen somebody robbed on this side of this corner of this building, you will say to me, I never saw anything, you see? So why would that also not suggest to us that I agree with you, perhaps it's not parallel realities, it's parallel vantage points, but that in itself then suggests to me, using the analogy that I've just unpacked for you, that we are encountering different alternative realities. Things have played out for me that haven't played out for you, even though we both are plugged into viewing the same thing. So it just gives us more food for a thought, really. I don't have an easy answer to what you are saying, but I would say that we are curating our realities based on our perception of certain things. And that's why we mustn't be so easy to dismiss the other's point of view also. And so that's where I come back to the point that Mark Ronch made, which was to say, are we having a collective consciousness which is trying to advance itself, or are we really trying to strive for our own individualistic and subjective views of things? And I would say that these things are entangled. But I'm thinking out loud with you all in this seminar, and this ultimately will be the paper I'll be taking to a conference at the beginning of September, which I'd like to flesh out a bit more. So thank you also for the lovely affirmations about the poetic words. I'll be sure to use them in that talk then.
Great.
And
Do you want to just add? Yes.
yeah, just a quick response. Just to say, in terms of the alternative perspectives of variances, that in the past we've interpreted that as a conflict that has to be resolved, and we've used all the normal human ways to do that. Power or assess, and maybe the trick is not to see it as a conflict, but as things that exist in the same space. And what becomes more important for us now is to learn to communicate across that difference perspective, but not trying to solve the conflict by arbitrating it, but rather by sharing notes. Yeah, but again, I'm also thinking aloud. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Gary. And also, before we go to Alex, I must admit I want to just abuse my position as chair and also jump in. And I think it's one thing that we need to think about quite carefully, and that is the Mandela effect assumes multiple worlds, not multiple ways of seeing the world. So if you want to accept the Mandela effect, you have to accept the idea of multiple worlds, not the idea of multiple perspectives on the one world. Because given your building kind of scenario, if you translated it to the Mandela thing, Mandela would have died, I would have seen it, you would not have seen it. So it would not be I saw Mandela die and you saw Mandela live. That's a matter of multiple worlds. So the Mandela effect has to go hand in hand with multiple worlds, not multiple perspectives on the one world that is complex and we see different aspects of it. So it's a matter of coherence then. So it's just something to think about. Okay, so I just wanted to slip that in because otherwise we're getting philosophically incoherent. Okay, so Alex, and then we'll go on to Rachel.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I'd love it when poetry comes into philosophy seminars. If you could share it in the series, that'd be great. Maybe consider it as a broad email. So it would be very helpful for me if you could bring your presentation to bear on two examples in public debate. Well, maybe the latter is not a public debate question, but the first public debate is on whether the Earth is a sphere or whether the Earth is flat. So how does the idea of multiple worlds existing in one land on that? And the second is if we're all curating our realities, how does that resolve an incidence when, say, I see my girlfriend with another man, and I come to her and say, why are you hanging out with this guy? And she says, no, I wasn't with it. It was someone else completely. And then I see her hang out with the same guy, and then she just denies it. But I see her with my own eyes. But in another room, she'll say, no, that hasn't happened. So if you could bring your presentation to bear on those two things, I'd be very grateful.
Thank you so much, Alex. Gosh, I don't know whether I have answers to these very difficult and also deeply philosophical questions. But let me come to the first one. How would what I'm speaking about tie in with the notions of whether the Earth is a sphere or is flat? My simple answer to that question is to say, I don't know. I have to rely on information that I've gathered. So I'm going to gather information to either enlighten myself, and either with my critical thinking, I have to come to some conclusion, or I'm not going to be engaging with that much critical thinking because I think I know already, and I have to go and find others that affirm what I think I know. So in that way, it comes then to your second point, which is that we are curating our realities. I would also say, Andrea, I fully agree with what you said just before Alex made his comment that I'm obsessed and fascinated with the idea of multiple worlds and multiple realities, and which is why I would say also that I don't subscribe to the idea that that there's only one reality that we are viewing differently. So to answer your question about the analogy with your girlfriend being with another man, and what would you make of it? Even though she says no, definitely that wasn't me. Well, I think what we have to come down to in a situation like that is, you know what you know. So you cannot know what she knows, nor can she know what you know unless you communicate it. That's why I spent the first half of my talk also addressing the concept of communication. And when you see that after communicating your idea or your belief, that there's a cognitive dissonance between the two of you, you won't find resolution because she will insist that that was not her and you will insist that it was. So from that perspective, there's a conundrum here at play philosophically. I would disagree with the fact that people are going to say, no, she's just lying. She's making it up. She was always with that man. Because me personally, subjectively, I'm open to the possibility that your mind could have curated a scenario where that's what you wanted to see or needed to see for whatever reason. So this can be taken in so many directions. And she would say, I was never doing that. He's imposing his worldview on me because he's waiting for me to cheat actively. Or perhaps she was. That's why I like the idea of a multiverse, multiple worlds. Because what's true for you in your world is not true for the next. But it could be quite what's the word I'm looking for? It could be quite accurate that what you are perceiving as her lying to you could also be real. So you see there's multiple possibilities of reality. So where your consciousness is at is which one will take greater hold in you. And quantum physics is trying to say you will be encountering all of these possibilities in your oversoul, trying to bank the experiences. But what you need to garner from your existence right now is where your consciousness will be. So it's not an easy answer, once again, to a difficult question. And because these things are in a way esoteric, we are struggling to find the words. They are ineffable. They are not a part of mainstream thinking, but I'm encouraged by the fact that more humans are starting to be open to the possibility that there could be parallel realities. Well, I personally know that they exist. You see, that's why I say if you know something, it's very hard for somebody to deconstruct it for you because it will result in a cognitive dissonance once again.
Glenn, thanks. Sorry, I'm very aware of time. We're actually shifting over time now. So I'd like to just give Rachel a voice, maybe as our last comment, and then close off after that. So thanks, Rachel.
Hi, I'm just going to try and see if I can have the video as well. I'll keep my comments quite short. I think one thing, I think maybe the reason that the poetic nature of what you shared struck people so much is because it's so different to what we experience in online, where it's noticed, especially lately, the quality of exchange seems to be so flattened and one-dimensional. So it's like this almost very amazing, almost like healing kind of quality of something that is more, has more layers and is more complex. And I think we are hungry for that kind of communication rather than a kind of very combative kind of communication. So I really felt that I enjoyed it, but it brings up quite a tension within me, because then I think if I accept this idea of multiple different universes and not just like perspectives on the world, and we're saying it's not necessarily possible to reconcile them, what then happens when I need to take a stand for something? Is there a time where I say, I will put, my body on the line for this cause or this thing that I see happening. Maybe it's happening immediately in front of me. And, you know, I feel a call to kind of act. And then also like within the law and in policy, so, you know, it relies on a kind of consensus, like we must think, for example, with the vaccine or with COVID, what do we think is the best thing to do under the circumstances, and doesn't that rely on a kind of like common reality? So how do you navigate situations where you feel an intense need to take a stand, or does that not really happen within this understanding of multiple universes?
Thanks so much, Rachel. I'm going to be very brief because I know we are over time. I would just say very simply that to advocate for something or dissent on something with authenticity. So if you bring your human consciousness to a scenario, whether it be a group of people or a phenomenon that's happening, and you know why you're taking that position, and it's rooted either in past experiences or in memory or coherence of a particular ideology, the integration of it in your moral compass in life, that will propel you, that will fuel you to speak up for something, even though it goes against the grain of mainstream thought. That's what I'm trying to do with this talk, also by introducing the Mandela phenomena, just as an example to say, how could it be that hundreds of thousands of people on this planet would misremember the same thing? I want to interrogate that a bit more. So, but at the same time, accepting that the people would have a different world of view, and I'd have to put my ideas and thoughts in conversation with them, even though they may not see the value of it. And so by continuing to advocate or dissent with authenticity, you don't overthink or become stalled by the complexity of this phenomenon of dual worlds or parallel realities or multiple worlds. So I'm going to leave it on that note, but I want to thank everybody for engaging with me on these very strange ideas and thoughts. It hasn't been easy, but I'm so glad it was well received.
Thanks, Glenn. It was wonderful. And I think absolutely that note that you're ending on with the idea of authenticity, and it just speaks of the need for kind of love and trust and communication, kindness. I think if anything can come out of your talk, it's exactly that word, authenticity, in your world, whatever it is. So thank you very much for rich, a wonderful, enlightening talk that could go on again forever. But hopefully we will keep picking up these themes. We will definitely pick up the theme of complexity next week. And we will be having a talk by Brian Castellani, a complexity expert, about a maybe different kind of thinking. But so, yeah, I think, why is it so hard to think about issues of health and mental health and wellness and that kind of thing? So I think it will be very interesting, and probably an interesting kind of follow on from your talk. So thank you very, very much for having the courage to present some wacky ideas to us. Always appreciated from you. All right, thanks everyone. And we are well out of time, so hopefully see you all next week. Okay, cheers.